Hi, everybody. So this slide looks a little scary, what your attendees aren't telling you. And that's not meant to say that they're not telling you the truth. But what we want to talk about today is how they're feeling, as Anna mentioned. So here we are, it's the age of sensors. It's never been easier to collect data, and that's any kind of data. It could be fitness data, it could be, your mobile phone in your pocket has a lot of sensors in it. And we talk about this so frequently from that fitness context. But the reality is it goes much beyond that. And, for most people, when they stand up on a stage in front of a lot of people, their heart starts to beat or their palms get a little sweaty. Those are physiological indicators that are directly related to your emotional state. And so what that really means is that the same technology that can measure how many steps you take also can tell you a lot more about what the attendee experiences. And that's really what we're focused on at Lightwave. So again, we think about this as biometric technology allows the emotional to become visible. And we look at that on a lot of levels. We think about that as far as what experiences we can create using this data, whether that's bioreactive concerts and all sorts of work like that I'll go through a little later. But it also means that you, the event organizer, has this amazing wealth of information about how to create the perfect event. And this, we think, is a brand new stream of data that's never really been talked about. I think when we think about this, it also means the way that we currently measure this is through feeling, right? It's through our intuition. We say that great events have an amazing energy. And what does that really mean? What does one experience have that another doesn't? And we think that there's a way now to allow you to have that quality to it, but then also to take that same energy and transform it in different ways. So in this case, how about lighting that is reactive? So imagine that, for instance, the color of the wash in your room is determined on what the engagement level is of your audience, and that can be dynamically changing. Things like the soundtrack could be generated based on the motion of the people here, at your event. So the possibilities are really endless, and it starts to activate the imagination. We also think that there is a new type of event technologist that's emerging. And this is somebody who works in this space and is really focused on how to take technology and bring that into the event space in a way that's really natural. This is something that, we think this is just the beginning of. And it starts with, for instance, hardware. So people don't realize the mobile phone has about 75% of the sensors that a wearable device has. Things like accelerometry, things like barometer, what level of the theater are they sitting? How can you use that information to create a better event? There's really so much. But then also, taking that data and actually having, for instance, the standard event application to have a little bit more intelligence. This is something that is really an untapped opportunity. And then finally being able to take that into the web and have, for instance, an API that allows you to access that data and then transform it into something else. This is a lot of technology talk, but I want to talk about what this actually means. And this is just to spur some ideas. I hope that you here in the room will have 100 ideas even better than these. But for instance, for Wimbledon this year, we worked with Jaguar to create an experience where we use biometrics to communicate what the feeling was at Wimbledon. In the UK, this is like the Super Bowl times 10 as far as excitement. And for those who are lucky enough to have a ticket, they just, they have a picture of themselves sitting at their seat in center court, and that's basically the extent of that. But what if there was a way to transform that feeling and then be able to showcase that, for instance, around the UK through billboards? And this is something that's very kind of interesting, right? Taking the live experience and being able to amplify that. So in this case, here's examples of some of the different stations where these dynamic billboards were. Every 30 minutes, the energy of the room was created into this beautiful animated billboard that showed exactly at that moment what it felt like to be there. And then also, when there were big moments in match play, being able to also detect what that felt like. So the next one I think is really relevant to you all here, because what we created for Pepsi at South by Southwest last year was an environment where every single piece of the production was impacted by the event attendees. So imagine, everyone who came in was given a wristband in this case because we wanted a lot of very high quality biometric data. But what we were able to do was then use every single bit of that. So what you see projected on the attendees is actually the live code streaming from the wristbands as an additional effect. But then everyone who came in was kind of greeted by name. And so that was a very interesting moment. And then that center visualization you see there, imagine that being completely dynamically changing based on what was happening in the room. The most important part, though, was after that, the kind of data that we were able to surface was really amazing. There was a moment where we had a meter on screen, and based on how hard you were dancing, this meter would fill up. And then essentially, the reward for that was you got this Pepsi bourbon cocktail. So we passed out these cocktails, and we noticed that there was something changing in the energy just qualitatively through observation. When we looked at the data after the fact, though, we realized that while people did calm down in order to consume the beverage, there was a 12% increase in their dancing and their excitement after that moment. So when you think about what that means, this is this is the cusp. I know this, I think this has a much bigger implication than just passing out some, cocktails. I think there's really the opportunity to have this feedback mechanism without having to ask people via survey, what did you think of the event? To be able in real time to change maybe the course of what you were doing or move things around or make a different decision based on the real-time data. It's very, very exciting. There's a few more examples here that are sort of related. This is an example of how we were able to take that same data and create a shareable asset. So we did a concert with Google in Singapore last December, and here you'll see Paul Oakenfold and Steve Aoki, two big DJs, using a dashboard that was giving them the real-time energy level of the audience. So imagine the DJ being able to change their set based upon what the crowd level was. Let's say that they've had a big hit coming up, and they notice that the crowd is actually too excited right now, so they play a little slower song before that big hit so that they have the narrative arc that they're looking for. And this is brand new interactions. These things, even 5 years ago, they just weren't possible. It's very exciting. And I think, too, where this becomes really applicable to you guys is every single attendee that came to this event, within a few hours, this was a partnership with Google, so we use Google Plus for this, but Paul Oakenfold, one of the DJs, actually sent out a personalized report to every single attendee showing them what their dance data was, right? How excited they were, what their favorite song was, and this was all created dynamically. This was all done through software. So that makes this something that, this is a new level of engagement and also shows you something about yourself, and we think, we've seen a great response from event attendees. And then another example, kind of in a different realm. For the TED conference this year, this is an attendee of very, very smart people. They've seen a lot. People have been trying to impress them, for a long time. So what can you do in this context that's actually novel? So we worked with Target, and we created essentially, I'll actually go back a slide. This is, what we wanted to do was to visualize your self-perception versus your body's truth. And that was because the theme for the TED conference this year was truth and dare. And so when you think about that, what we were able to do was people wore a lightwave device, in this case, again, it was a wearable, but a lot of this can be done through the mobile phone. And then essentially we had them fill out a survey, questionnaire of a lot of their, kind of just very seemingly innocuous things. How daring are you, and other attributes. And then what they did was they came into one of these booths and they watched a 2-minute video of a human life cycle. So you could imagine, birth and then all these important milestones throughout life, ending with an elderly couple and sort of the death and all these very evocative moments. And what that was able to do was then give us enough data to correlate the self-reported answers against their biometric reactions to this content and create these really beautiful art pieces, and that's what they were designed as. So essentially, you'd go through this experience, and within 60 seconds, you'd have this beautiful piece of art that was tailored to you. So in a group like TED, 1,600 people, over 800 of them came through this experience. So it's very scalable, and I think when you think about biometrics and you think about this kind of data, it just seems very scary, but it's very quickly not becoming that. So in this case, this is one of my favorite kind of stories. This person here on the I guess right-hand side from me is somebody who really didn't have a good fit as far as what their self-perception was versus what their data told them. I believe they were a little bit more courageous than they thought they were. The person on the other side, though, came through and told us, I'm a mindfulness expert. And so we were really curious about what this data was going to be. And if you look, it's a near perfect match. So it's really incredible. And again, this is something where we were really aiming for high throughput. How can everyone have this very personalized experience, but built in a way that doesn't really hinder the production? And I think that's one thing, again, I kind of put it to everyone here in the room. There's so many ways to achieve really mind-blowing activations without really, causing a lot of stress if it's designed properly using, like essentially understanding what it is you want to accomplish. Another example of a more kind of passive way of doing this that's still really exciting is what we did for the Cannes advertising lines this year. We had a contest, we gave away 50 Apple Watches, and we loaded a Lightwave application called Pulse. And actually, I'll just say too, what's really cool about this when you see this is a reskinnable application. So it's just a matter of, if there's a brand that wants to sponsor it, it's actually very simple to deploy. And this, really before devices like the Apple Watch, it was very difficult to do these kinds of activations. So you'd get the app, and then what would happen was, rather than telling you how many steps you walked around the festival, which is just done, and people, they're not very interested in that. It's not really giving them a lot of value. We kind of flipped it on its head, and instead, we created these beautiful dynamic visualizations. Obviously, these are static, but imagine these being very moving, beautiful, and constantly evolving throughout your day. So every time you'd see the Lightwave Pulse app on your watch or on your phone, there would be all of the data up until the previous time that you had checked it that was dynamically changing and evolving. And people were very curious about it. It was almost like a mood ring. And then what was really special about this is all of that data created some amazing content. So this was in partnership with a media agency called Mindshare. And so, that's why it's a little cheeky. They definitely wanted to have some humor, but they had so much social content that was able to be generated by people just being at the event. They didn't have to do anything differently besides just go and have a great time. And now you could see, for instance, up here in the top corner, that's a heat map of where people are spending their time based on gender, right? And so that's an entirely new way of looking at our audiences, and that for us is what we think is really exciting. And we also noticed female attendees were definitely very active during this event. How does that change the way that you tailor your content, for instance? There's so much that can happen, and I think really where we want everyone here to think. I sort of open with this, but I really mean it. There is such an amazing opportunity, and this technology it's just the beginning stages. How many here have a Fitbit or a fitness tracker? That's a lot of you, and this is really just the absolute beginning of it. And when you think about events, you have such a unique opportunity to connect with audiences. And how do you start to really push yourselves too? Again, we come back to the event technologist. I don't think you're going to have to go it alone. I think very soon there will be a lot of people who are specialized in understanding. If you walk out in the floor today, you'll see so many of these booths are around technology, but they're not around trying to make your life a little easier or trying to make the attendee experience 10 times what it was. They're just kind of technology for technology's sake. And we think that's going to change. In the next 5 years, this will really, this will be something that really empowers you in the same way that social media has changed the way that we think about events too. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.